One of the most forgotten aspects of a CRM migration, but probably the most essential, are the processes. These are the routine/daily actions that your team does and even your automations do to make your business operate. But it's forgotten because I think people think about, oh, we just got to get all of our data from CRM into CRM. At the end of the day, there's people doing things. And so this is one of the 3 key variables of how we think of migrations at RevPartners. We're a HubSpot elite agency, and my name is Paul Good, and I wrote our playbook on how we go about it. So let's get into it. What does that look like? So here are our 3 key variables. We've talked about data, aka the objects and properties that come over from the integrations, the tech stack that comes into it, and processes are those user stories that come into it. How they stack on top of each other is there's so many little processes that are associated with it. From we have a handoff to we think about lifecycle stages, sales stages, lead scoring. These are all of our playbooks that we do. We build our playbooks very process oriented and thinking about what teams have to do at different stages. That's why you'll notice a lot of them, but you're thinking about it from day one, and they're intertwined with your integrations. Integrations are that tech stack that you're doing. But when you're thinking about migrating an integration, you also think about what process they're doing. What are the step-by-step actions and which team members are involved and which data is being involved. The go live process is they're used to using Salesforce right now. They've really built their daily habits into it. We have to think about what those daily habits look like in a new CRM. Thankfully, with processes, you can actually do the most setup with this to really just like get it in. You can get a pilot group to really go through that. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. But the bluff, it's the user stories. It's those routine actions that your team and your systems complete every day. So I'm going to talk about it in these kind of 3 variables. This is a similar graphic I've been using, and hopefully the consistency helps make this clear. So in your top section, you have your CRM, you're moving from Salesforce to HubSpot. When you're thinking about processes, you have to think about the data that's associated with it. You have opportunities, you're moving into deals, you have opportunity name to deal name, blah, blah, blah. The processes, one of the most essential ones is how do we update deal name? How do we update deal properties? Is it in a property section on the left-hand side? Is it in the middle section? It's not just how do we migrate all this deal data into HubSpot. It's how do we actually update that on a consistent basis? Is there an automation that's updating your deal name based off of company name and other aspects? Well, we have to rebuild that automation if it's essential. Something like deal name, I would argue, is essential. And so deal name from moving deal stages, is that an automated thing or is that a manual process? Do your users know how to drag and drop from here? Because the UI of Salesforce and HubSpot are just different. And so it's thinking about very minor things that really scale up from just routine actions. And migrations are hard no matter what, but it's one I really want to make sure that is never forgotten because it's really easy to forget about it when you're thinking about the big picture of data and softwares. You have to think about the daily actions our team does. Lastly is sending quotes, because that one is a process that's intertwined with sending a quote, is intertwined with integrations and software. We have to think about the Panda doc. How do we get that into our new instance? And what does the process in Salesforce look like? Maybe that looks different inside of HubSpot. Maybe we're using DocuSign, but the integration inside of HubSpot doesn't work the way we want it to. And we want to use Panda docs because Panda docs is really custom built for HubSpot. Now let's look at the schedule of events. So we use these high level stages of discovery build. We use this across all of our different playbooks and how we kind of think of things. We've uncovered the essential processes. There are probably hundreds of processes within your CRM. We want to uncover the essential ones and who completes them. Is it a human being or is it an automation that we're doing? And is that an internal automation or is that an external automation? Are we using another process, another outside one, or are we using it inside of the CRM? From there, then we document and build them out in the new CRM. And this is where an advantage of processes is we can really build out these processes and get a pilot group in there. And that's where measure is get actual users testing these things and be like, wait, this isn't how I thought it would work. You're like, okay, how can we make that little bit of change? That's what's really helpful about processes is you can actually test it a lot better. But because there's such a vast amount of them, it does get challenging there. Delivery is this cutover period of where we maybe get a bigger than just a pilot group. We get a bigger sample size of them. Maybe you only bring over one group of people at a time. How we think of that is really dependent on how big of a company you have to just how intertwined in the CRM they are. Like, is it a daily thing? Is it something where they're barely even using it, so we don't really have to think about it? But generally, we would want to have a very clear cut over time with different stages of it, like micro stages within that for the different team members, because this also involves the integrations and the data, and there's a lot of moving pieces. So whatever we can do to make this more easy is generally our recommendation. And adoption is, we want to document these things. And maybe we already had a lot of documentation for the previous CRM, so now we have to go update that documentation, because this is a big change. When you move from one CRM to another, their UIs are different. This is people's daily lives changing. I think we just want to go above and beyond to really ensure that the team is operating as normal, and it takes diligence and time to really get into those routine actions of what they do. So processes, the things to note, the main one I'm going to call out here is the better the documentation, the easier this is. If you're like, yeah, well, people do things and it happens, but you don't have anything documented, how you move people doing things into a new software is endlessly harder versus if you already had a standard operating procedure. You're like, okay, these steps work, these ones don't. Okay, we're going to change these steps. We might change a couple of words here, change a couple of links. The more documentation you have, the better. So if you're thinking about migrating, this is a good first step of just start to document in some type of way. Because regardless if you're going to do it yourself or work with a partner, the more documentation you have, the better. You have more processes than you realize. There's examples, right? There's the manual data updates and movement of deal stages to automations, right? When you're sending like an email after a form submission, that's a process that you have to think about. And then we have onboarding and training. When you're training your new sales reps on, you build all your documentation around coming into Salesforce and you're moving to HubSpot, that's a new process you have to think about too. So it's not just the processes of how you do the daily actions, it's how you onboard your team into those daily actions as well. Tech stack is, if your tech stack changes, your process does change. You know, if you're used to using a certain piece of software and you have new variables that come into play with it, your teams change. And the more people and roles you have, the more time you should give them. And as you do discover, you just learn what the right teams are and which teams own which processes. In summary, the more documentation you have, the better for everybody. Next one we're going to get into is a summary where I bring back all of our kind of like the best tips and tricks from these videos and then wrap it up into a nice bow of how you would go about moving from Salesforce into HubSpot. Till next time.